Hey y'all, welcome back to the Becoming You Through Him series. I'm your host, Aaliyah J. Thomas. In the last episode, we talked all about positioning and what it means when God is trying to get you in alignment with His plan. Okay? Today's episode is going to talk all about peace be still. Okay? Let's hop right into today's episode. Peace be still is all about obedience. I wanted to kind of play on the whole verse. I think is Mark 4:39. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a few, but ultimately it's about stillness. So when you are in the last episode we talked about having to make hard decisions. There is going to be a lot of quiet. You're becoming is isolation. It may be grief, it may be separation, you're being set apart. There's loneliness, right, that comes with it. But at the same time, the journey is very, very important because you are refining skills and characteristics for yourself to be able to hold the capacity that God is giving you, right? God is calling you for more, and He wants to give you more, right? So you have to be able to have the capacity to take on more, right? And I mean that in every sense of the word. So, I want to talk about obedience in this episode of Peace Be Still because for a long time I thought that obedience meant action, right? I thought that you needed to be doing certain things for you to be obedient to God in order for you to reap some type of reward, right? But a lot of times, just in general, me thinking that obedience had to do with action again comes from that living to survive mentality, right? So there was still some things, God is always working on me, okay? But in the season of being isolated, having to make, that very hard decision, like I talked about in the last episode of having to leave my child's father, it actually meant obedience actually taught me that well, not even obedience, that season actually taught me, like the season of having to make hard decisions actually taught me that obedience meant restraint. And it could be different based on your season, but for my season it was about restraint, right? And for me, a lot of my season required some type of motion, right? I always had to be in some type of motion, and constantly moving felt safe. A lot of times when we are grieving, we are always moving because we don't want to actually feel our emotions. So once I understood that there were things that were going to require me to be still, I had to really, get comfortable being uncomfortable because, being still didn't feel safe, right? Um, but now, I was in a motionless period of my life because once you've made these hard decisions, now you kind of gotta like live with that hard truth. And that's basically like what I was in, right? Like I said in the previous episode, you get clarity. Like once you make a decision, you get the clarity, but the peace comes later. And a lot of times, again, peace be still. That peace comes from you being obedient. Okay, I hope I wrap that together. um and this state of being motionless, meaning that you're actively not doing anything. It was a period of my life where my old patterns was not working. Okay, so let's go to Mark 4:39. And he awoke, and he rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. What stood out, what still stands out to me about this verse is that, Jesus didn't panic, he didn't rush, he was calm, right? And I remember that there was this this calmness, this joy, this like serenity. I would say serenity came later, but you know, there was this sense of I'm okay. Um that came later. One, this is the thing, when we are used to living to survive, and now we're being shifted into this place, into this season where you have no choice but to do nothing. It could be very it could be a shock to your system, right? And um you know, I had to start being intentional about how I was showing up in being motionless, because um there's a certain authority that comes with the difference of, okay, I have to live to survive, versus, yeah, I could just be, right? Like, just, and that's what joy is. Joy is a constant state of being, right? um and I had to sit with the discomfort that came with being motionless, right? And once I learned to sit with that discomfort, and sometimes that's gonna look like sitting in your own thoughts, sitting with your demons. And I 100%, as a therapist, I 100%, you need to be talking to somebody, a life coach, a licensed therapist, a close friend. When you are going through this season, you need to talk to somebody, okay? Please do not try to put in your bootstraps and deal with this alone, okay? Like I said, I went back to therapy, and I had a very close confidant, you know, one of my oldest cousin. Shout out to Eddie. um yeah, so please do not try to sit in your discomfort without having someone that you can at least sound things off of, okay? But when you are sitting in that discomfort, it's going to be very easy for self sabotaging behaviors to come alive and knock on the door and um test you, right? You have to let those urges pass, okay? Self sabotage is going to be high if you do not lean into your obedience. The more you lean into your obedience, the more you continue to be in alignment with God's path, okay? So you know, this was the biggest season for me where I had to let go of other people's opinions. Um, Fear, loneliness, um, judgment, offensiveness. Not everything needs a reaction. I'm gonna say that again. Not everything needs a reaction. And I say this because when Jesus calmed that storm and he said, "Peace, be still," he wasn't even talking about the storm. Okay, he wasn't even talking about the storm. Okay, when he said peace be still, it wasn't even about the storm. It was in his tone. It was the authority in his tone that allowed the peace to come. So when Jesus said peace be still, it was about the peace. Okay? And that peace came because he said so. Okay? So when I say that not everything requires a reaction, it is because when God is calling you for more, he's handling things. God is handling things. And you know, at this time in my life, I will always say, God got me. I don't even have to argue with you. I don't have to go back and forth with you. I don't need you to see me. I don't need you to understand me. God got it. Because at the end of the day, God is doing things seen and unseen. So, you know, I would say two books that I would recommend is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, and The Bait of Satan by John Bevere. Okay. Um The Bait of Satan talks about, you know, how to not live life in a season of offense, and The Four Agreements is it's, I don't even have to say too much about these two books. You know, stillness, just being still and understanding that not everything needed reaction. It really taught me that, like I said, God is handling everything. Yeah, so God has already handled everything, and who am I to get in my Father's way? Who am I? Oh, no, God's gonna handle it. So, I really want you to, actually, some homework. Okay, so some homework for today's um episode is, where in my life am I creating motion because being still is uncomfortable? Where in life am I creating motion because being still is uncomfortable? So, in the next episode, we are going to be talking about what God started rebuilding for me once I got quiet. Right? Because again, he said peace be still. And I learned that in my stillness, um not everything needed a reaction. Okay, so I got quiet. So in the next episode, we're going to be talking about, what God started to rebuild for me once I was in that quietness. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If there's anything that touched you in today's episode, go ahead and put it in the comments below. Make sure you are following me on all social media platforms. If you're looking to start, understanding, your identity through God's voice, go ahead and get my devotional, Becoming You Through Him. It's a 40-day devotional, okay? The link will be down in the description. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. Don't forget that episodes drops every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Bye-bye.